Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
I'm glad you took your time. It's the off season now. We have a little break after spring football. More time for power pauses. I don't know, sleep. What do normal people do when they're not in constant motion 24 hours a day? I don't know.
Actually, what I'm doing as we are talking, I've got you on split screen with the transfer portal, which as we record this is open. So I'm just, if I look like I'm not paying attention to you, Tom, it's because I'm refreshing Twitter to see who else has entered the portal from around the country, to see if Colorado has any players remaining other than Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. And I don't think they do anymore. So it'll be an interesting May for the University of Colorado. So, Tom, spring is over. Spring practice at Ohio State is now over. So we thought we would go and just talk about some stock risers, some guys who made the most of spring practice. Today we'll talk about 8 guys on the offensive side of the ball. Thursday we will talk about 8 guys on the defensive side of the ball. And if at some point you see or sense some sort of a jump cut, it's because we had to stop recording to go do a live show for somebody from Ohio State that has entered the portal. So if suddenly it's like, boy, this was poorly edited, that's on me, and also on somebody who jumped into the portal when they should have known we were recording. So, Tom, I will give you first dibs if you would like to begin the show with one of 2 players that I know you're going to talk about. And so let's just get it going.
All right. Well, we'll start with the most obvious of the 2 extremely obvious choices of guys whose stock blew up the most during spring ball. I'll take Jeremiah Smith. And, this is one of these things where it's like, what are Apple shares trading at right now? What is our Amazon shares trading at right now? Wow, that's a big number. Hey, they just had a really good day and they just, the stock just went up again. Jeremiah Smith's I think his stock is about ready to split at this point because it's spiked so much over the last few weeks, last couple months. There has just been a very consistent parade of wows out of just about everyone. Everyone who's seen him has kind of had the same reaction. Had kind of a quiet spring game, which, you can chalk that up to playing against some very good defensive backs. That really didn't stop him much before. You can chalk that up to, mixing and matching quarterbacks. That didn't really seem to stop him before. It might have just been, it was kind of windy that day. We saw that kind of conversation around the Penn State spring game as well, where that was a windy day and the passing game didn't look very good. So I am going to assume that Jeremiah Smith's stock is just going to continue to rise, but he feels like by far the most obvious answer here of anyone.
Yeah, and you could still get it now and still make a killing on it. We've been talking about him obviously for a while, and wasn't that long ago we were talking about him. Could he be the 4th true freshman with 30 catches in a season at Ohio State? And I think we're well past that. A couple of weeks ago, maybe after we saw them on a Saturday practice, I went ahead and said 1,000 yards for Jeremiah Smith this season, and you poo-pooed it. I'm just wondering, Tom, where are you now in relation to that possibility after everything you've seen?
Yeah, I think all the numbers have gone up. Well, it's still pretty unfair to just say this guy is going to do something that's never been done in the history of Ohio State football, because it's a pretty long and illustrious history with a lot of very good players. But at this point, it's probably, I think there's a pretty good chance he's the leading receiver on the team, or at least the second leading receiver on the team. And the second leading receiver on the team is going to put up pretty big numbers. So I think I'm grudgingly getting dragged along to bet the over.
Look at you. Look at Tom. And we won't talk about some very good players today because the stock is plenty high, like Emeka Egbuka. Everybody saw the 2 one-handed catches in the spring game. We may not talk about him today, but don't worry, he's going to be outstanding this year. So you took the obvious 1A. I'll take obvious 1B and go with quarterback Julian Sayin. And people saw him in the spring game through an interception, had trouble with the wind. And so you got to see the freshman aspect of him, which I think is really, really good because it kind of dialed expectations back. I think heading into this, people have been hearing about how he's been the best quarterback in camp, and he's looked like this, and he's looked like that. He's looked very, very good for a freshman. He is advanced for a freshman. Still is a freshman, and I think people saw that on Saturday. Saw some trouble with the wind, saw some of these long throws that couldn't quite get there. So he still needs to grow, get stronger, get better. But you also saw some aspects of the ball comes out quickly. He's repping and switching back and forth with Lincoln Keenholz, battling essentially for that number 3 spot, which I don't think that anybody really expected until maybe after like the first week of camp or so, or not even the first week, because that was just 2 days. But that as you started to get into camp and you start hearing more and more about he's processing everything really well, and then we saw him a couple of times in practice, and then we hear about what he's been doing in practice. So his stock is really high now, and this is one that isn't for this year. This is down the road where you could see more and more and more.
Yeah, I think it feels like even if the quarterback battle is not officially down to 2, it feels like the quarterback battle is probably down to 2 just based on what we saw during the spring game. And Julian Sayin is not one of those 2. Julian Sayin, nonetheless, is exiting spring football, I think, with the ceiling for what his future could be substantially higher to me. And I think his role on this year's team is probably bigger than I was expecting it to be. I think I went into spring figuring, okay, you'll see him maybe some, get a little bit of time, definitely take a redshirt year. I don't know that I think that anymore. I think if he's the 3rd quarterback, then he's probably playing for at least 4, maybe more than 4 games. I don't know. I don't look at Julian Sayin and think, as a true freshman, this is someone you need to worry about what he's doing 5 years from now. I don't think he's a 5-year college player, probably, if we're having this conversation about him right now. So I don't know that you need to worry about maintaining that year of eligibility. And depending on how the battle for the starting job goes, it's possible that someone else could leave before the season, which then, is he the number 2 guy? Is he the number 3 guy? Where does he fit in there? So I think I'm not expecting him to start this year, but what I'm expecting from him this year has grown in terms of, he's probably entered the spring as number 4, might be leaving as number 3 maybe, and could enter the season potentially at number 3 or number 2. I mean, that's a substantial improvement. So yeah, I think he's a very good number 2 player on this list.
Tom, I'm going to let you behind the curtain. I just saw a tweet from a fake Pete Thamel account retweeted out that Will Johnson was entering the portal. And so I kind of reacted, and
you made a face, and I'm like, I don't think I said anything crazy there.
And the thing is, this is the account name is Pete Thamel. Hamilton. And it's still getting retweeted. So
I don't want to brag, Tony, but that account apparently does follow me. So not a burner. You saw me.
Yeah, no, follows me as well. But it's gonna be one of those days. It is April Fool's twice again. So anyway, sorry to derail, but I just wanted to let you know like why I reacted, and it was not anything important, even though initially I wasn't duped. I've admitted it. I am. But anyway, let's get back to the show. You are up next. You're on the clock.
All right. So I think I'm going to go with Seth McLaughlin. And, I think this is just based on not necessarily my perception, but I think what was broadly the perception of the fan base when he transferred, which, you saw a lot of, why would you want that guy? He was the guy who had the bad snaps in the Rose Bowl. And he had a very long, very good career at Alabama that did not involve bad snaps. And then you had some towards the end of the season. And I think everyone went, well, he's bad forever. And I think what you have seen this spring is, I guess we saw a couple bad snaps maybe at different times, but really not many. And I think he probably, based on the fact that you saw him repping with the ones a good bit during the spring game at center, and then you saw Carson Hinsman out at guard, and I don't think we ever saw Seth McLaughlin at guard. I think he's someone who, is probably, you got to look at him probably as a favorite to win that center job. And I think Ohio State fans are probably coming out of spring feeling a lot better about Seth McLaughlin as well.
Yeah, to be able to grab that job in assuming that has happened. I mean, he started the spring game and has been running with the ones the last throughout, but really in the last week, and you've seen the last couple of weeks, you saw Carson Hinsman at guard. So I'm going to chalk that up to win the job in 15 practices over last year's starter is impressive. And so definitely stock up there. And as a guy that we've seen him after practice, snapping with the quarterbacks, helping the younger offensive linemen. So has really integrated himself well with the offensive line, which is kind of what you need from your center. And Carson Hinsman, with that experience, we could have him on this list as well. In fact, I'll go ahead and put him on this list and start talking about him right now, who didn't play in the Cotton Bowl. And the stock right there couldn't have been lower, and could have been a guy that was, sent off or decided to leave, felt slighted about not even getting to play after starting 12 games. And then, having the off season that he did, one of the best off seasons among the offensive line, the coaches have talked about it, and still doing that while not only being benched, but also having a replacement brought in from the portal. Like, there was every reason for him to just pack it up and say, "This is crap, I'm out of here." And he did the exact opposite. He said, "I'm not going anywhere." And even if it's playing right guard, it's one of 5 on the offensive line. It's one unit. You're a part of that unit, and he wants to remain part of that unit. So I think his stock is up because of his offseason, his unselfishness, his experience. This is a spot, the right guard, that they're still trying to figure out who it's going to be. And I think at this point, I put a depth chart out yesterday on BuckeyeHuddle.com on Monday, and I've got Carson Hinsman as my starting right guard right now.
And I think that there's a real possibility that that's the case. I had him on my list as well, which is crazy that you would have both of the guys really competing for the starting center job, and they're both stock up. Like, well, only one of them can win the job. But, Hinsman, I think, first of all, I looked at Hinsman during the spring game and thought he looks noticeably bigger than he did last year. Like, last year he was probably playing a year before he was really, truly ready. That was a little bit of a Luke Whippler left, and they kind of went, what? What? And it kind of caught everyone by surprise. But he was maybe in a little before he was really, truly ready to be playing. Did a solid job all season. Had some trouble with the snaps again towards the end of this, towards that bowl prep, didn't play in the bowl game. And then, so that was another one where I think people went, well, he's broken forever, never going to be fixed again. It'll be terrible. And then he was perfectly fine in the spring. Like, again, you didn't, it was probably, you saw a couple bad ones at some point, but really not a consistent issue there as either. So I think he would be probably perfectly fine as the center. If I would agree with you, I think McLaughlin is the starting center probably for me coming out of spring. But if it ended up being, if there's an injury or whatever, it seems like Hinsman is a perfectly viable option there as well. And he looks like, just being bigger, he's probably a perfectly viable option at right guard as well. That one seems a little less settled. I think Ryan Day is, he sort of implied that they were at least open to looking in the portal to add someone else. And maybe that right guard spot is Tager Shabola. Maybe that's Luke Montgomery. Maybe that's Carson Hinsman. But I think Carson Hinsman is a perfectly acceptable answer at 2 different spots on that offensive line. I don't think this is going to be a real easy spot for them to upgrade in the portal. I think it's going to take, a pretty significant player to upgrade from what they've got at right guard. So that's a pretty clear stock up to me there as well. All right. Let's see. Who do I want to go with? You know what? Let's keep this on the offensive line because we entered the spring. I mean, this is a guy who started all last year and did a nice job. Josh Fryar was solid at right tackle all of last year, but there was, the whole right side of the offensive line felt like it was a little bit of an open question coming into the spring. Do you kick, is Fryar better suited to be a guard than a tackle? I had those conversations. And they were, the coaching staff was very clearly looking at that. And do you put Tager Shabola at tackle and you kick Fryar inside to right guard? What do you do? And then about halfway through the spring, all of a sudden, you just sort of stopped seeing them rotating people at right tackle. And it was like, okay, it feels, I'm not going to say Josh Fryar has clearly won the right tackle job, but if he had, this is a lot like what it would look like. And you just sort of stopped seeing rotation there. We saw George Fitzpatrick in there, I think, a little bit at one point, but not nearly enough that it made me think this is an open position battle now. So I feel like Fryar kind of really cemented himself there again as a very good, solid right tackle for them, where they can feel good about it. And really, if you've got McLaughlin at center, you got Fryar at right tackle, and you're only really worried about that one spot at the right guard, that's not bad because you have multiple good options there. And, if they happen to pull, if Caden Proctor goes into the portal for the third time this year or whatever, sure, you maybe look at him and then you move Fryar inside the guard, maybe. I mean, it just feels like the bar to replace Fryar at right tackle and kick him inside the right guard might be even higher than the bar to, if you're picking up a right guard in the portal. But it feels like Fryar at this point is, no matter how they organize that line, Fryar's going to be one of the best five. He's going to be starting somewhere, and it's probably going to be right tackle.
Yeah, at this point, I would be surprised if he's not at right tackle because he said somebody else would have to come in and blow them away or be out there and blow them away and then be able to land him. And somebody that would be an improvement from Fryar in the portal is not just going to be coveted by Ohio State. It's going to be a national battle. And, this is a guy I remember last year when prior to the 2024 season when they brought in Simmons and he moved from left tackle to right tackle, he was happy with that. He was happy about moving to right tackle. And I think he has a home there. He wants to stay there. Will obviously do whatever he is asked and has always done that, but has some ownership of that position. And you saw that another great offseason, as Ryan Day has said, he changed his body up, got quicker feet, has really tried to be better equipped for what he's going to face this year. And of course, he's getting the best work every practice, going against JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, and all of those guys. So I know a lot of people still view that Cotton Bowl as who he is, and I would say that nothing should be taken from that. As we keep saying, that was not that offensive line was not representative of the offensive line prior to that game or post that game. That was in a vacuum right there, and just leave it there and actually take it to the landfill.
Always a good place to leave your takes. Yes.
No, just like the vacuum. Leave the vacuum there. Take the bag out, throw it away.
If you need a guy to fix a vacuum, Tony, I know a guy. But
is that right? Is that
I
right?
Do. He's got more free time now. Not doing his old job anymore. More free time to work in the vacuum industry.
Say I wanted to peruse, could I show up to his porch and peruse
yes.
a sampling?
That he calls it his showroom, but yes.
Oh, show porch?
Yeah, just don't record video of it. He gets weird about that for some reason.
Okay, fair enough. I would understand that. I'm gonna go with Tom here. I've got a few here. I would say right now, let's go with James Peoples, because not only did he have some good moments, look good, really, really quick, great balance, runs low, runs hard, fast enough. I don't know that there's any questions on speed or anything like that. Catches the ball really well, but also now with Dallin Hayden in the portal, everybody moves up one. And I'm not convinced that he wouldn't have been third at some point anyway this season, but now he's definitely third. And so the stock is up from that because they will need, Ryan Day keeps talking about pair and spare isn't enough anymore. And he is that spare. So even in that kind of example, he has moved up. He's more important. And I think we're going to see quite a bit of him. And, you go back to Dallin Hayden rushing for 500 yards on 100 attempts as a true freshman. I think that's, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility here with so many games, 16 games, 100 attempts, you're talking 6 carries a game, but that's not going to be every game. There's going to be some games where maybe he has 12 and some games he has 0. So I don't know if 100, but I think if you give him 80, I still think he can get you that 500.
Yeah, this feels like a year where that third running back is going to get more carries because I think they view the first two guys as both starters. So if you're up in the second half, you're probably going to have both, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson out of there. So that's more carries for the third back, where he's not just coming in the fourth quarter where you'd normally be kind of getting the second guy a bunch of reps in the third quarter. Yeah, I think I'm, with Dallin Hayden now in the portal, he feels like he's clearly the number 3 back on this team, which if you have 2 number 1s, he's really kind of the number 2 back on this team. So yeah, I'm with you. I think he's got a potentially a pretty big year ahead of him. We'll see what they do in the portal there. Ryan Day, talked about wanting 5 guys, and it was super clear whether he was talking about 5 scholarship guys or if he views TC Caffey, who's a walk-on, but who was, shown some flashes at times. If they view him as one of those 5, he did seem like they were at least going to take a look in the portal and see. So maybe that, maybe some of those carries go to someone else who's not on the roster right now. But yeah, I think James Peoples is another one. That was another one I had on my list, as someone who I think my expectations for him this year have taken a big leap. My last one, Tony, I'm going way off the board here. Way off the board. How about walk-on wide receiver David Adolph? He's someone who, when you look at the wide receiver unit, the top level of that Ohio State wide receiver unit is so impressive and so good. And, you've got your Mecca Buka and your Carnell Tate and your Jeremiah Smith, and, Brandon Innes was banged up and missed time. Jaden Ballard seemed like he came on pretty strong at the end of spring camp, and, Myling Graham showing up in the summer. And I mean, you've got plenty of talent there, but it's just, there's not a lot of other guys there. A lot of the other guys, the class of 2022, a bunch of those guys are gone already. You already lost. Oh, I didn't even mention Bryson Rogers. Sorry. So Bryson Rogers should have been in the middle of that last group. It was not an intentional oversight. I was kind of going through it in my head. So sorry. But Noah Rogers is gone. Caleb not Downs. Caleb Brown is gone. Caleb Burton is gone. Like, they've lost a bunch of those guys in the 2022 class. Theoretically, you could lose someone else in the portal after the spring. We'll see how that all shakes out. But it just feels like we saw a bunch of David Adolph in the spring game. And, I think we have seen a decent amount of him over the course of the spring. I am not saying he's going to have even 10 catches or 100 yards or anything like that. I just think he's someone who was, way off the radar at the start of the spring. And now it's like, yeah, like fourth quarter against Akron, I could absolutely see him going out there and getting, 2 catches for 27 yards or whatever. He's someone who, as a walk-on, has kind of played himself into that playing time conversation a little bit over the course of the spring. And you could probably put Brennan Schramm on that list too. It feels like we've seen a decent amount of him this spring as well.
Yeah, and Adolph is a guy that was talked about last year as well. It's just they like him, and he's, I think, like 6'5", so he's kind of like that X receiver that they don't really have many of. If you're playing a Mecca in the slot, you've got Carnell Tate, and Jeremiah Smith has been, I think, playing more Z, and you can play both, whatever. But David Adolph has been battling with like Kojo Antwi to be one of those next guys in. And so I think that's a good one. I know they like him, and he's involved. I think he played. We've seen him play here and there, and when he's at practice, he's making plays as well. And so yeah, that's a good one. I like that one. I could also go with a walk on here. I could go with Bryson Rogers. I could go with G. Scott. I could go with Pat Gerd. For many, many reasons. I think it's interesting, Pat Gerd playing some of that fullback role in the spring game. He could become the next Mitch Rossi type there. Bryson Rogers was able to step up this spring, getting more time without Brandon Innes there over the second half of camp. I will just say G. Scott. I'll go there. And I know there's concerns about his blocking and all that. If you watch the first drive for Ohio State in the spring game for the Scarlet team, obviously they open in the T, and G. Scott shields and blocks Jack Sawyer, pins him and keeps him from getting to the play. I think 1 or 2 plays later, he catches a pass. On the very next play, he puts Caleb Downs on his back. So like just one drive, and then he got dinged up somewhere else later on and was fine. But just a little bit of an example of some of the stuff. And we've heard the leadership aspect. He's picked that up, and he's always been a leader in his own, to like his group of people, but it's more of a team wide thing that he's kind of done more of that. So I would put him there. They need him. They need somebody at tight end to step in. And I think he's the guy that has done a lot, and everything, the move that he made from receiver to tight end was about this year, essentially. Like, it's going to be a long process. Get stronger, get bigger, get better at blocking, all of these. It's learning a new position. So it has been a process. It has been designed to pay off at Ohio State for this year and then continue on after that. But so I think you've seen that progression this spring, and we'll see what it looks like this season. But I thought it was just a good performance in the spring game. How much stock you want to put into that or whatever, but I would have him stock up right now and see if he can maintain it.
Yeah, I think he's someone who came into spring for me as tight end 1 and left spring for me as tight end 1. So that's the only reason I didn't have him on my list. Yep. But I think I think he had a very good spring. I don't think there were any other tight ends that I looked and said, oh boy, that person is really pushing G. Scott for that top tight end spot. And that's going to be a spot where they've got to kind of figure some stuff out this year. And I don't know that we're going to see as much 12 personnel this year, because I don't know how much, I don't know how. We'll see what things look like coming out of fall camp. But, the rest of that tight end room, I think there's still work to do in different areas for a lot of different guys. You talked about Patrick Gerd earlier. I think he might be the number 2 guy in that kind of Mitch Rossi role right now. And maybe that's where they go when there's 12 personnel. Jelani Thurman has been solid this year. Again, it feels like that's still a little bit more potential than current. Like, it's, you're continuing to see the progress, you're continuing to see the growth, you're continuing to see the potential. It's just still a little bit of a work in progress there. So yeah, I think G. Scott's a good example there. So yeah.
I think they would have loved to have had Jelani Thurman or Will Kesmerick or even Bennett Christian on this list as well, just because they need more guys. But as we always say, it is a developmental position, and so Jelani Thurman has all of the ability, and it may just take another year. And then it may be one of those situations where it only takes till October,
Mm-hmm.
where at some point it's just going to click for him, and it's just youth, and he's got all of those tools, and it's just putting them together and seeing everything and playing and getting that experience in the games, where then he has that to draw back on, that to rely on, and then you just see him take off. And that wouldn't surprise me to see him blow up at some point this year or next year, because I think that is the expectation eventually for him. Anything else, Tom? You get any others on your list, or did you get through your list? Are you set?
I got through my list. I am with you. I think Jelani Thurman, you got to remember, this is only his second year, and we talk about that as a developmental position all the time. And, we talk about these guys in recruiting, and then we talk about them when they get here, and then we talk about them during their freshman year. And it feels like, man, he's been there forever. No, he's been on campus for 15 months at this point. Like, he is not behind schedule by any means. And there's also the amount of time between now and the first game against Akron is going to end up being, that's going to be what, like 30% of his total career by the time we get there, 25% of his total Ohio State career. So there's probably going to be significant growth between now and the start of the season for him. So you said October. It wouldn't shock me if he got there by September, and it wouldn't shock me if it took until next year. Like, it is a developmental position. He has not been there that long. He's not behind schedule. I know everyone wants to race out and say, oh, I thought this guy did terrible. He hasn't done, I thought he was going to catch 50 passes as a freshman. It's like, well, that's more on you than it is on him. So you got to be a little bit patient, but he is still young. Tony, there is still time for him to bite, for it to mean something.
At this same point in his career, Cade Stover was a defensive end, like somewhere between defensive end and linebacker.
He was a defensive end. I think he went, what did he go? Tight end, defensive end, linebacker, something like that. And yeah, he might have been on his third position at that point. And at that point you had people, well, if he's on a third position, obviously he just doesn't have a place to play, and he's never going to pan out. And so jumping in way too early on guys and having, big hot takes on guys at developmental positions, 15 months into their careers is a real good way to get freezing cold taked. That's just, that is my professional advice to you.
We should put a list together of players who it's like, oh, he's never going to develop, that eventually become, how in the world are they going to replace this guy? Because he would be one of them where it's like, gee, okay, just try him at tight end, see what happens, whatever. Doesn't work out, we can turn him into a, whatever. And can he snap, whatever. And it's like, now it's like, I don't know how they're going to replace Kate Stover. There's good luck. Can you go to the portal? Do the Chiefs have somebody? Anyway.
Is Austin Stogner in there again? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I would also say we could throw in, talking about walk-ons, you throw in TC Caffey in there, running back.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll see if they keep him in terms of that 5 or if they go to the portal. But he's a guy that I wonder where he would be right now if he didn't have the knee injury that he dealt with, and meaning where would he be here, or would he be somewhere else playing? Mm-hmm. I think everybody really, really likes him, and so there's certainly I would expect him to get some carries this year. I don't know how many, but when you're talking about walk-ons, you can go through the stats over year and see the walk-on carries are, I throw it over under of like 1.5 basically on this season, because sometimes they're there, sometimes they aren't. Just depends on how many scholarship running backs you got. But that will do it. That's the offense. Stock up on all of these guys. And of course, I always want to invite you guys to check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. That is the best way to support what we do. You can find us at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Go ahead and hit the thumbs up on this one if you have not yet, but I know you already have. And of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. We would appreciate that. 5-star ratings and reviews on the podcast machines are always appreciated. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.